Take a quick pause. Did you know that over 90% of you watching haven't hit the subscribe button yet? If you're enjoying this video, take a second to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us bring you more gripping stories every day. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments so we can see how far our stories are reaching. Your support really keeps us going. Now, let's jump back into the video. I always prided myself on being the thoughtful one. The quiet gestures, the subtle surprises, the little details that made a moment feel like magic. That was me. I wasn't flashy. I didn't make grand declarations on social media or buy lavish gifts just for show. I believed in quiet loyalty, in the kind of love that whispers, not shouts. So when her birthday weekend approached and she told me not to make a big deal, just let her have a girls' weekend in the mountains with her sister and a couple of close friends, I took it in stride. I even booked a spa treatment for her, had flowers delivered to the cabin, and wrote a card that took me hours to finish. It felt good doing things like that. It always had. But something inside me, it told me to go. Call it instinct or maybe just a romantic impulse, but I decided I'd drive up and surprise her. The cabin was only 4 hours away. I left Friday night after work, packed an overnight bag, and brought the cupcakes she loved from the bakery near our place. I imagined her smile when she opened the door and saw me standing there with her favorite treats and that silly paper crown I always made her wear on her birthday. The GPS lost signal about 20 minutes from the cabin, so I navigated by memory and a fading screenshot of the directions she'd sent her sister. The road twisted into thick forest, where trees leaned in like they had secrets. The cabin sat alone, hidden behind a thin wooden gate and tucked between two steep hills. It was beautiful, peaceful, isolated. The porch light was on when I pulled in, the sound of laughter drifting out through the open window. I heard her voice, light and carefree, echoing into the night. It made me smile. I didn't want to knock. Not right away. I thought, maybe I'll sneak up and surprise her. Be playful, a harmless little scare before the smiles and kisses. So I parked quietly and walked toward the side window, crouching just a little so I wouldn't be seen. The curtains were half drawn, but the living room was in full view. She was on the couch, curled up with a blanket, a wine glass in hand. Her sister Jamie sat beside her, her legs tucked under her like a teenager gossiping at a sleepover. "You are so bad," Jamie giggled, waving her glass. My wife, Anna, laughed, that full, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard in weeks. "I know," Anna said, brushing her hair back. "But come on, don't act like you wouldn't have done the same." My fingers tensed against the wooden window frame. I didn't know why. Something about her tone, it felt different. Jamie raised an eyebrow. "So you really don't feel guilty at all?" Anna sipped her wine. "Not really. I mean, maybe a little. But only because he's such a nice guy, like, too nice. Sometimes it's annoying." They both burst into laughter. I stayed still, breath held in my throat. Jamie leaned forward. Wait. Tell me again. What did he say? The guy from the bar?" Anna smirked. "He said he couldn't believe I was married, said I didn't act like it. And when I told him I was, he just laughed and said, 'Your husband must be an idiot.'" My chest tightened. "And?" Jamie prompted, eyes wide. "I didn't correct him," Anna said simply. "I just let it be. And then we went back to his room." Silence. Laughter again. Lower this time. Quieter. Jamie shook her head. "I mean, I'm not judging you, but what if he finds out?" Anna shrugged. "He won't. He doesn't even suspect. That's the thing. He trusts me too much. He's always trying to take care of me like I'm some fragile glass doll. I swear, if he buys me one more surprise cupcake or writes another note about how proud he is of me, I might actually scream." Her voice, usually so soft and affectionate, had turned sharp, almost mocking. I stepped back from the window, breath fogging in the cold night air. My heartbeat was too loud in my ears. She kept talking. "And you know what's worse?" Anna said, her voice dipping low. "Sometimes I wish he'd just mess up, cheat, yell, do something to make it easier to hate him. But he's just there, predictable, always trying so hard. It's exhausting." Jamie didn't say anything. "I used to love him," Anna continued, Or maybe I just loved the idea of him. Now it's like he's a habit I can't quit. My body moved before I could think. I stumbled away from the window, almost tripping on the porch step. I dropped the cupcake box on the gravel without realizing. One of them rolled out, smudged pink frosting against the ground like a wound. I got back into the car and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the windshield as if it might offer answers. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That came later. What I felt then was a mix of shame and confusion, like I'd walked into a play halfway through and didn't know my lines anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from her. "Hope you're having a good night. Love you." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed and went black. I thought about knocking, marching inside, confronting her, demanding the truth. But something stopped me. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. If I walked in now, it would explode. Tears, screaming, denials, lies trying to rewrite the truth I had already heard with my own ears. So I just sat. For minutes, maybe hours, listening to the faint sounds of laughter from inside. And I wondered how many more times she'd said things like that about me. How long had she been laughing behind my back? It was cold and my hands shook. Not from the weather, but from something else, something deeper. Like a fracture in the center of my chest that I couldn't see but could feel widening with every breath. I turned the key in the ignition, engine rumbling softly. But I didn't drive away. Not yet. I needed to decide. Was I going to go back in there, confront her, tear the mask off the life we'd built together? Or was I going to stay silent, carry this wound back with me and pretend, for a little longer, that I was still the man she once loved? I sat there in the dark, her birthday card still tucked in my jacket pocket, and tried to remember the last time I felt truly loved. And I couldn't. Not anymore. I don't know how long I sat in that car. Maybe an hour, maybe two. The cold crept through the seams of the windows and settled in my bones. My hands, stiff around the steering wheel, didn't move. Neither did I. Not until I saw the porch light go off. I waited a few more minutes after the cabin went dark. Then I quietly opened the car door and stepped out, careful not to make a sound. The gravel shifted beneath my shoes, but no one stirred inside. The cupcake box still lay where I'd dropped it, the frosting now smeared into the side of the cardboard. I picked it up and stood there, unsure of what to do with it. For some reason, I couldn't throw it away. I walked back to the car and placed the box gently on the passenger seat. Then I drove slowly down the long dirt road, headlights barely cutting through the trees that bent low above me. It felt like driving through a tunnel, narrow, endless, suffocating. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of walking into our apartment, seeing her framed photos on the wall, the throw blanket she always curled up with on the couch, it made my stomach turn. So I drove until I found a cheap motel just off the highway. A dusty, forgettable place with peeling paint and flickering signs. The kind of place people stayed when they wanted to disappear. I checked in without much thought. The clerk didn't ask questions. He just handed me a key, slid a small bottle of water across the counter, and told me to enjoy my night. Enjoy? The word echoed like a cruel joke. The room smelled faintly of mildew and old pine cleaner. The bed was stiff. The light over the sink buzzed every few seconds. I sat on the edge of the mattress, still wearing my jacket, and stared at the wall. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat. My chest was tight, but my face was blank. Somewhere in the silence, I took out my phone. Her last text still sat there, unopened. "Hope you're having a good night. Love you." I stared at it again, rereading the words that now felt poisoned. The kind of message I might have once smiled at, maybe replied with something sweet. But tonight, they burned. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a blank note and started typing, not knowing what I was trying to write. It turned into a list. Anna cheated. She laughed about me. She called me predictable. She said I was a habit. She doesn't feel guilty. The words stared back like proof of something I didn't want to admit. I read them over and over again until I couldn't anymore, then locked my phone screen and lay back on the bed. I didn't sleep. Not really. I drifted in and out, the sound of their laughter still playing on a loop in my head. By morning, the ache had settled deeper. Less like a fresh wound, more like something internal that would take time to rot. I didn't eat, didn't shower, just checked out and got back into my car, the cupcake box still untouched on the seat. I drove with no plan. The highway stretched out like an open question I couldn't answer. For a while, I convinced myself I might go back to the cabin, maybe confront her before she left, but the thought of seeing her face, the same one that had kissed me goodbye 2 days ago, felt unbearable. I ended up pulling into a park. It was quiet. A few scattered trees, a couple benches, and a walking trail that curved out of sight. I sat on the bench near the trailhead, the cold wood biting through my jeans. Birds chirped overhead, oblivious to the way my life had just shifted on its axis. It was almost peaceful. Almost. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. "Hey, babe, just wanted to check in. We're heading back later tonight. Want to do something tomorrow? Just you and me?" I read it twice, 3 times. There it was again. That mask, the sweetness, the warmth, the illusion. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened our photos, scrolled through vacations, birthdays, lazy Sunday mornings. There was one where she was in the kitchen, still in pajamas, laughing at something I'd said. The way she looked at me, bright-eyed, real, made my throat tighten. That moment had felt genuine. That version of her felt genuine. Was it? Had I missed something back then, too? My mind spiraled through moments, trying to remember if there had been clues. Her late-night texts, the extra hours at work, the sudden distance in her voice sometimes. I had explained it all away. She was tired. She was stressed. She just needed space. I was always ready with an excuse that protected her. But now, I couldn't unhear what I'd heard. A small group of kids passed on bikes laughing as they rode down the hill. Their joy made me feel old, tired, like something inside me had aged overnight. That night, I went home, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I couldn't run forever, and part of me needed to see how she would look at me when she walked through that door. I needed to know if I could still pretend. I cleaned up before she came back, took a long shower, changed the sheets, put the cupcakes in the fridge as if they had never left. She arrived a little past 8. I heard the key in the lock, the familiar sound of her boots stepping into the hallway. She called out, "Hey, babe!" like everything was normal. I stood in the kitchen, hands resting on the edge of the counter. When she saw me, she smiled, walked over, hugged me from behind. "I missed you," she said, nuzzling into my back. I didn't turn around, just said softly, "Yeah?" She paused. "Yeah. Why do you sound weird?" I turned then, looked at her. She looked exactly the same. Hair a little tousled, cheeks flushed from the cold. There was no trace of guilt in her eyes, just that usual light, that practiced smile. "I just didn't sleep well," I lied. She nodded, stepping back. "You should have come with us. Jamie kept saying how quiet it was without you. I really missed you." I watched her closely, every word, every blink. She was lying, right to my face, so effortlessly. That night, we sat on the couch, watched some old show, and she rested her head on my shoulder, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't wished I would just disappear. I kept thinking about the moment outside that cabin, about the way her voice changed when she talked about me, the way she laughed at the idea of me being too nice. I wasn't angry, that's what scared me. I was just empty. And slowly, without realizing it, I began to make a new list in my mind. Not of her faults, but of the things I needed to do. Quietly, carefully, things that would let me walk away without burning it all down. Because I wasn't going to stay. Not like this. Not anymore. The days that followed were strange. I moved through them as if underwater, everything muffled, delayed. Anna never noticed. Or maybe she did and chose not to ask. Either way, we resumed our routines like the foundation hadn't already cracked beneath us. She made coffee every morning, kissed me on the cheek before heading to work, sent sweet little texts during the day like she always had. I read every one of them with a quiet kind of ache, a mix of sadness and disbelief. How easily she wore that mask. How easily I'd once believed it. But now I was watching. Really watching. I noticed how she locked her phone when I walked into a room, how she'd smile at something on the screen, then tuck it face down beside her. I noticed how she never mentioned that cabin weekend again. No stories about Jamie or what they did. It was like it had never happened, except it had. Every detail lived in my mind like a permanent scar. And every night when she fell asleep beside me, I'd lie awake, listening to her breathing, wondering how I'd gotten here, married to someone who no longer saw me as anything more than a convenience, a placeholder, something safe, predictable. The silence between us wasn't loud. That would have been easier. It was gentle, subtle, like a thread slowly unraveling in the dark. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted to. God, I wanted to some nights. I'd lie there imagining what I'd say, how I'd throw her words back at her, ask her how long she'd been mocking me behind my back, ask if she ever really loved me or if it had all just been a performance. But every time the moment came, I said nothing. Because a part of me didn't want a scene. I didn't want the screaming or the crying or the desperate apologies that I knew wouldn't be real. I wanted clarity, so I waited. And then, one Friday afternoon, I got it. I left work early that day, told my boss I wasn't feeling well. My stomach was in knots all morning anyway, and I couldn't focus. Something in my chest told me not to go home right away. So I sat in my car, parked a few streets away from our building, just thinking. I almost didn't see it. But then, around 4:30, her car pulled in, and she wasn't alone. He got out of the passenger side. Tall, light jacket, familiar face. It took me a second to place him. Jamie's husband. So it wasn't just Jamie at the cabin after all. He walked her to the entrance, too close. His hand brushed hers. She looked up at him with that same smile, the one I used to think was mine alone. Then she leaned in and whispered something. He laughed. And just before he turned to leave, she kissed his cheek. Her hand lingered on his arm a little too long. I felt nothing. No surge of rage, no impulse to run out and confront them, just confirmation. It was real, all of it, and she'd lied again. I drove away before she saw me. I went to the same park I'd visited after the cabin, the same cold bench under the tree. This time I brought a notepad and a pen. I started writing again, but it wasn't a list this time. It was a letter to her. I didn't write it out of anger. I didn't even expect to give it to her. But something inside me needed to put the words somewhere. I told her I knew, that I'd known for weeks, that I'd heard her voice on the other side of the cabin wall laughing at me, dismissing me like I was a piece of furniture she'd outgrown. I told her how it felt to stand there holding cupcakes while she told someone I was a habit, how my hands had gone numb and my heart had started beating in a strange, slow rhythm I didn't recognize. I wrote about the silence that followed, the way she kissed me like nothing had changed, the way I played along, waiting for the truth to break through her smile. And I ended it simply. I'm not angry, just done. I signed my name, folded the page, slipped it into my coat pocket. That night, I made dinner. She came home late. Said traffic had been bad. I nodded, passed her a glass of wine. We sat at the table like a normal couple, talking about mundane things, the weather, her boss, my coworker's new puppy. I watched her as she talked. Her eyes sparkled. She laughed easily. And I wondered if she even remembered what she'd said that night at the cabin. Probably not. It hadn't meant anything to her, just another throwaway moment, another mask she wore among people who truly knew her, or thought they did. I wondered what she would say if she knew I'd been there, if she knew I'd heard every word. After dinner, she went to shower. I stayed behind and washed the dishes slowly. When I was done, I wiped my hands, went into the bedroom, and placed the letter on her pillow. Then I packed a bag. Not much, just what I needed. Clothes, my laptop, a few books, the essentials. I didn't want to take everything. That would feel too final, too angry. This wasn't revenge, it was release. I didn't leave a note, just the letter. As I walked out, I looked around our apartment one last time. The framed photo of us in Paris still hung by the door. The couch still had her throw blanket draped across it. Her keys were in the bowl we kept by the entryway. It all looked so normal. But normal wasn't enough anymore. Normal had become a lie. I closed the door behind me and didn't look back. That night, I slept in a friend's spare room. I didn't explain much, just said I needed a few days. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a beer and told me the guest bed was clean. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Over and over. Calls, texts, all from her. I didn't respond. Eventually, she stopped trying. Maybe she read the letter, maybe she didn't. It doesn't really matter now. Some people asked me why I didn't explode, why I didn't confront her, scream, demand answers. I think part of me wanted to hold on to my dignity, my peace. She had already taken enough from me. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. So I chose silence. Not because I was weak, but because sometimes walking away quietly is the loudest thing you can do. Months passed. I found a new place. Smaller, simpler. I filled it with things that felt like me. Started reading again, running, cooking meals I actually wanted. I started over. There were hard days, of course. Nights when the silence pressed in a little too tight. When the memory of her voice on the other side of that cabin wall still echoed in my ears. But those moments passed. And every time they did, I reminded myself of the truth. I hadn't lost her. She'd lost me. And that made all the difference.